Hi, I'm Joanne. I'm an addict.
Hi, Joanne.
Yeah, that was really nice, Lawrence. Yeah, I am quite nervous. And to my own experience and recollection of coming into the fellowship, I was in a treatment centre. I came in at the end of 1993, and it was a treatment centre that didn't really talk about the 12 steps. So they kind of gave us the 12 steps sort of almost, in passing. And when I came out, I kind of knew that I needed something more. And I found out about NA, and I was told that there was a meeting in Yeovil on a Saturday afternoon. And that was my first experience of Narcotics Anonymous. And I ended up going to this meeting. It was on a Saturday afternoon, and I see Gareth smiling there. And I went with another person. And our first experience was very scary. I arrived at this meeting, and there must have been about 6 or 7 people there. And they were doing step 8, 9, 10, it could have been anything. I mean, they could have been speaking in tongues for all it, mattered to me. I didn't understand anything, and they were not very friendly, actually. It seemed quite cliquey, and there was me. And if I hadn't been with this other person, I might not have come back. But there was something happening in this meeting. These people were smiling, so that sort of was scary also, because I thought maybe it was a cult. But the other thing was that there were a number of people at this meeting who were clean and had been clean for quite a long time. I mean, Herman's going to be, celebrating his 15 years today. I know Gareth, I think, is about 14 years. And there are a number of people. And for me, that was quite important. I mean, I hadn't been, by the time I got to this meeting, I think at that stage I was maybe 30 days clean. And, that was quite a miracle in and of itself. But up until that point, in over just about 25 years, I hadn't been able to stay clean for an hour at a time mostly. So the fact that there were people who were clean for a year or just over a year was incredibly important to me. I was very, very impressed, and I needed to be impressed. I didn't know anything about the quality of recovery at that point. That would come later, where I would sit and judge everybody the way that was another story. But at that point, it was, I was impressed. And so even though I felt very, very nervous, I thought, well, I could go back. And I was then told about the meeting on a Monday night, and there was a meeting on a Thursday night in Hillbrow. Now, I was one of those people who hadn't really been, I didn't get my drugs in Hillbrow. I got my drugs from doctors. So Hillbrow was another story for me. But anyway, I went to Hillbrow. And in those days, I mean, we used to take our blue books to the meetings. I didn't have a blue book yet, but I bought one. It was the thing to do. And I'm laughing because it was really important, And it was important to me because I didn't really have any money in those days. And so for me to buy a blue book, hello, Janet. And I'm so pleased you're here because so for me to actually lay out, and I can't remember how much the blue book cost in those days, but to lay out this money for this book was quite something, and it meant a lot to me. And so we used to go to the meetings with our blue books, and often at the meetings we would actually read from the books and then share on what was. I can't remember if I think it was one meeting a week that was a step meeting, and I know the Yeovil meeting was a step, and I think it was a tradition meeting. I can't remember, and it was really amazing because that was my, introduction to Narcotics Anonymous, and then, as I say, some of the people were incredibly unfriendly. but a few of them were friendly enough for me to, and for me, Narcotics Anonymous has always been a little bit like my family, sort of like hugely dysfunctional, and and so I kind of feel at home, and then a little bit functional enough and a little bit caring enough for me to, and I keep going back, it's like sometimes abusive, and so I keep going back for more, and I kind of get to, this is where I've gotten to heal my relationships, whereas with my family, I never really got to do that, so I stuck around, and, and for me, the thing about NA was, I stuck around because really there was nowhere else to go. And in those days, in the Hillbrow meetings, when we got to read the traditions and we said, we were not under surveillance at any time, yeah, right, we had the police right next door, so we were, and and things were quite chaotic in those days. I mean, because of course there was my brother. I had this brother who was also an addict and also recovering, and he was quite colourful, should I say. And he caused a lot of chaos in the fellowship, and because everyone didn't like him, I kind of got people kind of by inference, I got a lot of, and I got a lot of trouble from that. And so I remember one meeting where chairs were thrown across the room because there was a newcomer in the room. My brother was reading non-NA literature, and he got bussed for that. And then it was very chaotic. But somehow we kind of muddled through that. And some people were staying clean, and getting recovery. I was one of them. And it was absolutely amazing for me. And even as I think the fellowship was quite small, I remember the biggest meeting I think was a Thursday night meeting at Hillbrow, where sometimes there were up to 25 or 30 people, and I think that was quite big. And then I remember taking on a service position because service keeps you clean, and I really, really wanted to do service. And I was offered the tea and coffee position, whereupon I was told that everybody who'd done that service position had relapsed. So I decided that I was not going to relapse and I would do that service position, and I did. And for me it was my most, I remember that with such fondness, because it was the first time I'd done anything that responsible for so many, many years, and it was fantastic, and I loved that. The meetings, kind of were, and the meetings kind of grew. And then I remember, of course, the Area Services Committee meetings, which we, were called intergroup in those days. And Joel was reminding me earlier on, because he was one of the people around then too, before my time actually, that some of them used to meet at his house. And those were chaotic as well. Cakes and biscuits, I remember, and quite a nice time. But I don't remember much about anything else that got done there. But somehow, it kind of grew, and I really think, what's amazing is that it's because of all that stuff that happened in the early years, and I'm a sort of medium type older time member. There are lots of people that you're going to hear later on who have a lot more clean time than me, as I've said, and that it's because of all that old stuff that a lot of it is that NA is today, and that there is such an amazing fellowship today. And I remember those. I think that I've dissociated a lot of the early shit because I don't want to remember it, but some of the not so good stuff, but that's okay. But there was some really, we laughed a lot, that too. And sometimes I don't laugh so much anymore, but it was it was some really fun times. And I think that, for me, because then we decided that my brother decided, I think, and this guy called Frank, and I'm mentioning names because also he was quite a colourful member too, that there should be a meeting in Parkhurst. And I remember some of the older timers saying, you can't just open another meeting, and he said, well, there needs to be a meeting in the north. There are all these meetings, Hillbrow and Yeovil, and it's getting dangerous. And so against, what the older timers said, we started this meeting in Parkhurst, the Wednesday meeting. And look where Parkhurst is today. But it was in the little room. And then it moved to the bigger room, and now there are 2 meetings in Parkhurst. And so that's how kind of the fellowship grew, from 3 meetings to 4 meetings, and then things kind of snowballed. And, for me, I remember, going to, I've never kind of, I went to a meeting when I was about 6 months clean, and I shared at this meeting that a lot of my notorious past, and I really needed to share it. And from that moment on, one of the older timers took it upon himself to tell everybody that came into NA what I had done. And I remember feeling quite hurt about that, but it also reminded me of my family. My family did stuff like that. And but I still don't regret it, because I've ended up staying clean and in recovery. And this person, unfortunately, some years later relapsed. And I think, it was explained to me, we talk about anonymity. And I've never really shared stuff in the fellowship that I don't really mind about my anonymity. I do mind if my anonymity is not kept sort of from the aliens out there. Do you know what I mean? I don't really mind about... I sort of expect that if I start saying very, very horrible things about somebody within the fellowship, I kind of expect that they're going to get to hear about that. You know what I mean? And so that I'm okay with. But I really hope that, and it's never happened, that my anonymity has sort of been broken outside the bigger fellowship, and I'm really okay with that. What I really love about this fellowship, and that's been from the beginning, because I've been thinking about this week from the beginning to now in my 12 and a half years, is that whatever happens, and I know we're a bunch of addicts and there's a lot of politics, and that hasn't changed from whether it's been 10 people to 30 people to 300 people to 500 people, is that mostly we get to support each other's greatness. And I think that that's so important. And I feel quite emotional about that. I mean, Mark, you were saying you feel emotional. I mean, I feel really amazing. Like when we sit in a room, and that's really helped me stay clean and in recovery, just by sitting in a room, but just by saying that we're clean for today, even if we, that's been amazing. And everything that I really got, and learned. And, recovery for me, the meetings weren't a substitute for therapy or anything else I've done, but a lot of what I got sort of mirrored from you guys, even as I'm standing here now, I really think has been a huge part of my growth, and I think that has really been my sort of experience of NA. I mean, the meetings have grown, and I've grown with them, and I think the amazing thing for me in terms of my experience of NA over the years is that, the spiritual principles don't change, but I have, and I do. And I think that that's why it's so important for me to keep coming back to meetings, because how I experienced the steps, in those days, in those early days when I took my blue book to a meeting, and how I get to experience them today is about the levels. And that's why it's just so awesome. And that's why I really love this fellowship so hugely. And I think that, for me, I'm going to keep coming back. And I think that what I learned in those early days was about prayer and meditation. And I got that quite early on, but that's also evolved, But what I also got in the early days was that I need to practice and practice and practice. And I think that's the discipline that I got from the early days by taking my book to a meeting. And however chaotic it was, it gave me the rituals of keeping doing it. And if I go to yoga once and then I miss it for 6 months, well, obviously when I go again, I'm going to feel quite crap. You know what I mean? And I think it's, for me, that's the thing about prayer, and that's the thing about doing it. You know what I mean? I can't expect to have a relationship with my higher power if I just do it once and then expect that it's going to... And it's like that for me, and I think that for me, I feel very blessed to have been around in those years, all those months and everything else. And, the people... A lot of the people that I love the most are actually, some of them are sitting here. It doesn't matter if I don't see them for a while. I feel it so much in my heart. And this is where I learned to love, really in this fellowship. This is what this fellowship gave to me. And my being willing to pitch up for it. I know that. And I've experienced it. You know what I mean? And this is where I kind of think that I learned to, or what I want to do is really to, forgive the past, embrace the present, and surrender the future. Thank you for letting me share.